What's up guys, Asian here again, and this is the first of a series of videos taking a look at the Elsweyr patch notes, otherwise known as the PTS patch 5.0.0. The reason why I'm splitting these up into separate videos is because this particular set of patch notes is actually very long. So I'm dividing this up basically to Elsweyr patch notes, and then each of the 5 different classes, and then other, which would basically cover everything else that's not covered under one of those other 6 broader categories. So this is taking a look specifically at any sort of Elsweyr introduction, so anything that's added into Elsweyr, such as sets and things like that. So that's going to be the point of this video, and then the other PTS patch notes videos will be taking a look at each of the 5 classes separately, so Dragon Knights, Sorcerers, Nightblades, Templars, and Wardens, and then the last 7th video we'll be taking a look at everything else, any sort of other generic changes that is not put on fits into any of the other 6 categories there. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get started here first with the PTS patch notes that concern Elsweyr. Now, just like all the other PTS videos, patch notes videos that I have released, do keep in mind that this is the first iteration of the PTS patch notes, so things are going to change between 5.0.0 and when when Elsweyr is actually released on live. Just don't take anything that you see here as gospel, don't take anything here as a final version. There are going to be some balance changes that are going to be happening throughout the PTS cycle. So let's go ahead and start off here with Elsweyr. So we're going to be covering the Elsweyr chapter here, and we'll also be covering the base game update just because that is also kind of within the sort of new features update slash big changes section here. The second video will obviously be taking a look at any sort of race changes, class changes to any sort of abilities, and then the last video will be taking a look at any sort of remaining changes here, probably mostly looking at the itemization and item sets and any sort of base game changes here. These will all be from more of a PvE perspective. I'll try to touch upon PvP where I feel comfortable, but that's not really my area of expertise. So Elsweyr has been released, so you will be able to jump onto the PTS if you have an invite. So if you do not have an invite, I don't believe you'll be able to access the PTS. Now, in order to get the invite, you either need to have participated in the Morrowind PTS or the Somerset PTS, either one of them, or you will have received an invite code in your email address that is associated with the ESO account. So once you get that address, you should be able to log on to the PTS and take a look at Elsweyr and all that it has to offer. So we have the new zone, obviously, Elsweyr. So just based on what they have here, you have 6 delves, 6 world bosses, 2 public dungeons, a new set of crafting stations, and then they claim over 30 hours of content just in the zone itself. So pretty much what you would expect to see from a new full zone, I should say. So the 6 delves, 6 world bosses, 2 public dungeons, that's pretty standard for sort of expansion zone. So Hrothgar, Vardenfell, Somerset, those also had 6 delves, 6 world bosses, and 2 public dungeons. I'm sure there are also going to be things like dailies that are also introduced with Elsweyr. We have the new class Necromancer. I will be doing a separate video taking a look at Necromancers, kind of their class skills and how I think about the class. But this is the 6th class on ESO. Currently, there's a couple of kind of big bugs that are happening in terms of combat that are making testing Necromancers versus other classes a little bit trickier. So I will not really be making any sort of comments on where Necromancers stack up just because of a couple of those combat bugs. But Necromancer does seem to be a very interesting class right now, very sort of unique. The one thing that I will mention here though is that everything that you see concerning Necromancers is going to be toned down. So on the live stream that they did a few weeks ago, they did mention that they were not really focused in on balance when they first created a Necromancer. They're going to rebalance things, adjust things during the PTS cycle. So what you see right now for Necromancers is almost certainly going to change between now and when it's pushed onto live. Just keep that in mind whenever you see any sort of Necromancer videos that are like, oh, look at this DPS parse that I just did, or this is how Necromancers stack up against the other classes. It is obviously going to change, and there are a couple of bugs right now on the PTS that are making comparisons a little bit more tricky. Now we do have a new full trial, so Sunspire is the new trial here. I did stream this last night, so for those of you guys who didn't catch that, head on over to Twitch and you will be able to kind of see the Sunspire trial. We managed to do it on normal, and then we did the first 2 bosses on vet, and then at that point we kind of ran out of time, so we didn't get a chance to finish the trial. So obviously it's a 12-man trial, and it is a full trial, so it does have add polls between bosses, which is fantastic. The add polls are actually fairly challenging. Each of the bosses has its own hard mode, so the kind of goal behind Sunspire, as communicated by the Lost devs, is that Veteran is going to be accessible to pretty much anybody who is capable of doing vet trials. And then you have a series of progression through hard mode. So you can do one boss hard mode, then the other two not. Then you can do the first two bosses hard mode, and then the last boss not. And then you can do all three bosses hard mode. So there is a clear sort of ladder of progression. So it kind of goes vet, just base vet is pretty accessible, and then you go scale up all the way up to the 3 hard modes for each of the 3 different bosses. Obviously there's going to be new trial sets, and they are also going to be perfected versions of these sets that can be dropped from vet. What we found was that you don't have to do vet hard mode to get the perfect versions. As long as you do base game vet, you should be able to get the perfect version drops. And then there is obviously a skin, there is a new earnable mount, and then you have titles and housing items here. So there are 14 new item sets introduced with Elsweyr, so that's going to be 3 overland, 3 crafted, 4 trials, normal, and then 4 vet trials. So that's a total of 14 new sets, although arguably the trial sets are just perfected versions of themselves, so arguably it's only 10 new sets. So for the overland sets, the light armor is Crafty Elfique. It basically adds a ton of max magicka, so 1096 max magicka for the 2, 3, 4 piece, and then the 5 piece adds 2560 max magicka. So unlike Necropotence, where you do need to have a pet active, this just is a flat increase to max magicka. I did do the math a little bit earlier for somebody else, and it works out to be about 841 additional effective spell damage from this set. So it's actually not a bad option now. I believe that personally, that the best beginner magicka setup now is going to be something like Crafty Elfique and then Julianos, combined with probably 2-piece Torx Pact for the additional spell damage, as sort of a beginner DPS set, something that's going to be very easily obtained. Meter armor set is Vesture of Bralock Bray. The 2-piece adds magicka regen, 3-piece adds stamina regen, and the 4-piece reduces the radius you can be detected while sneaking by 2 meters, and reduces the cost of sneak by 10%. 5-piece, while crouching, you restore 670 magicka, stamina, and health every second. So this is kind of more of a role-playing set. You're not really going to be seeing this used in PvE or PvP. Actually, arguably in PvP, although even then it's probably going to be better sets out there. This is going to be more useful for things like Dark Brotherhood, Thieves Guild, if you're one of those sneaky role-playing types who also want to kind of do Thieves Guild, Dark Brotherhood quest line without necessarily being caught or worrying about being caught. Finally, the heavy armor set is called Call of the Undertaker. 2-piece adds healing taken, 3-piece adds max health, the 4-piece adds healing done, the 5-piece adds max health, and when you deal damage to the light attack, you apply minor lifesteal to your enemy for 8 seconds. This effect can occur once every 8 seconds. So you will notice here that the 2% healing done that is in the base game has been buffed up to 4% healing done, so that brings it more in line with the 4% healing taken, and also more in line with the 129 additional spell damage. I did do a video taking a look at how much effective spell damage you would need in order to get healing done, the current 2% healing done modifier, to outpace the 129 spell damage. So this does bring it a little bit more in line. But considering the 5-piece, minor lifesteal is already applied via Blood Altar in PvE from a healer or a tank, so this particular set is not going to be very useful for PvE. From a PvP standpoint, again, you can just throw down a Blood Altar and it'll apply minor lifesteal that way. So this set probably not going to be used all too much. Now the 3 crafted sets here, so you can craft these in heavy, light, or medium, however you'd like. You will need to know a certain number of traits, research traits, in order to craft these sets. It does not state it here, but I believe I think all of the expansions have been 3, 6, or 4, 6, and 8. So that is most likely what's going to happen here. So you're going to need 4 traits for one set, 6 traits for another, and then 8 traits for the last. The first set is going to be Central's Grits, so it adds 4% healing done, max health, healing taken, and then the 5-piece after being damaged by damage over time ability. You increase your healing received by 60% and your physical and spell resistance by 25-85 for 3 seconds. Not necessarily going to be very useful in PvE and PvP. The healing received is going to be is pretty small. I would like to see it buffed up to maybe a 12% increase, and physical and spell resistance buff is nice as is. You can maybe bump it up maybe to like 28 to 3000 maybe, but overall it's probably not going to be all that useful because of that proc condition. You have to be damaged by damage over time ability. It might see some use in PvE, but there are likely other better sets if you're going to go for survivability. So overall, I don't think this set's going to be used all too often here. The second crafted set is Vistari's Tutelage, so the 2-piece adds max stamina, the 3-piece adds max health, the 4-piece adds max magic up, the 5-piece adds magic regen, stamina regen, and when you resurrect an ally, you and your ally gain 258 weapon and spell damage and 10% cost reduction to all abilities for 10 seconds. So this seems like it might be beneficial for like a combat medic in PvP. I don't really see this being used all too often in PvE because you obviously don't want to die in a PvE. But for PvP, obviously dying is going to be inevitable. You're going to die at some point. So it might be beneficial for like a combat medic in a Zerg, perhaps to have this set, maybe like a Necromancer with that Mass Resurrection Ultimate. I'll have to kind of see whether the res ulti from Necromancers does proc this set or not. But I do see this being useful in PvP if you're a healer whose sole job is, for example, to resurrect people, like a Templar healer or something like that. It might be very beneficial to have this set here. Old Harbor's favorite is the last set, so the 2-piece adds max magicka, 3-piece adds max stamina, the 4-piece adds spell and weapon damage. The 5-piece is pretty interesting. When you heal yourself or an ally, you summon Cadwell's Noble Mount, who, after 2 seconds, casts a healing spell on you and your allies around him over 4 seconds. When you damage an enemy, you summon the same mount, who after 2 seconds explodes, damaging enemies around him for a certain amount of magic damage over 4 seconds. This can only be summoned every 10 seconds. So pretty interesting sets. The fact that it is a pretty much 100% guaranteed proc chance depending on whether you're healing somebody or damaging something makes it a little bit trickier to use. You will have to be very, very aware of that cooldown so you know which proc you want to cause. So basically whenever you do any sort of action, you're going to proc this set. So if you want to heal, make sure you heal after that 10 seconds. If you want to damage, you gotta make sure you're damaging after 10 seconds. For like a soul damage DPS, this set obviously is going to be pretty nice because you can only ever really proc the damage component. But if you're a healer, it's going to be a little bit trickier because when you're healing, you should also be light weaving, and some of your attacks, some of your abilities also damage enemies. So you might end up proccing the damage part of this proc rather than the healing proc. So again, interesting set, but I don't think it's going to be used too often in PvE. Now for the trial sets, we do have 4 trial sets. So we have 2 light armor, 1 medium, and 1 heavy. So the light armor set that's DPS focused is False God's Devotion. The 2-piece adds spell crit, the 3-piece adds minus slayer, the 4-piece adds spell crit, the 5-piece adds spell damage, and it reduces the cost of magic abilities by 8%. When you kill an enemy, you restore 2150 magicka and gain major expedition for 8 seconds. So this is basically the magicka version of Vicious Ophidian. A little bit too late. It's probably not going to be all that useful. You might see it being used in places like Black Rose Prison, Dragonstar Arena, maybe VMA, maybe 4-man content. But for trials, there are definitely going to be stronger sets than running False God's Devotion. Medium armor set is Tooth of Locustiz. 2-piece adds weapon damage, 3-piece gives you minus slayer, the 4-piece gives you weapon damage. 5-piece, when you activate a synergy, you gain Major Slayer for 15 seconds, increasing your damage done to dungeon and trial monsters by 15%. Now, I did do a previous video taking a look at this set compared to War Machine on like a Stamina Nightblade. So that was using the assumption that Stamina Nightblades are still going to be used in trials. Obviously, if you don't have the Stamina Nightblade or Stamina Templar or a Magicka Nightblade or Magicka Warden or Magicka Templar, basically if you don't have a class that's able to use Master Architect or War Machine, then that math basically goes out the window, and Locustiz is going to be strongest. So I will be interested in testing this out in an actual raid dummy. There are a few challenges that I kind of have to take into consideration. There's a couple of assumptions that I have to make, but it should be interesting to see how Tooth of Locustiz compares to War Machine and Master Architect. Definitely a set that I would definitely pick up if I was a Stamina DPS though. Eye of Navitas is the healer set. The 2-piece adds Magicka Regen, the 3-piece adds Minor Aegis, the 4-piece adds Max Magicka. The 5-piece, when an ally activates one of your synergies, you and the ally who activate a synergy get 12% cost reduction for non-ultimate abilities for 3 seconds. This effect can occur every 6 seconds. The general consensus, and I've spoken to a few healers about this, discussed this on Discord with them, is this general consensus is this set is pretty bad overall. It is reliant activating synergies, and it only lasts for 3 seconds. It occurs every 6 seconds, so in order to get a maximum uptime of 50%, you would have to activate 4 synergies within the 20-second interval, which is unrealistic for a healer because most healers can only throw out 3 synergies. So when you compare it to like Worm or Herstein's, this ends up being very comparable, but it is far less consistent. So this set is going to need to be changed if they do want it to be used on healers. Then Claw of Yolnahkriin, this is the heavy armor tank set. 2-piece adds max health, 3-piece adds minor aegis, the 4-piece adds max stamina, and the 5-piece when you taunt an enemy, you give yourself and 11 group members minor courage for 15 seconds, increasing your weapon and spell damage by 129. This effect can occur once every 8 seconds. So this is minor courage, which does stack with major courage from Olorime, or spell power cure. So this set is definitely going to be used on tanks now, just for the additional weapon and spell damage. This is definitely going to be a set you'll want to pick up if you are a tank. The general consensus among tanks is you're going to have Claw of Yolnahkriin and Alkash on one tank, preferably a tank that's obviously doing the most taunting, so mainly your main tank. And your off tank will be running something like Eben, and then some other set, perhaps Powerful Assault or another Alkash or something like that. On the perfected versions, I'm not going to go over all of the different side effects, I'll just tell you what the 5-piece adds. So for perfected False God's Devotion, it adds max magicka. For perfected Tooth of Logastes, it adds the weapon crit. For the perfected Eye of Navintas, it adds max magicka. And the perfected Claw of Yolnahkriin, you get max health. There are going to be new collectibles here. And then you have new dies and titles. You have some new housings coming in. There's new motifs and new crafting ingredients. So the new crafting ingredients have kind of been figured out already. They do add in minor heroism. One of them, I believe it's Dragon's Blood, also has lingering health, restore stamina, and vulnerability. Dragon's Bile has vulnerability, and I'm blanking on the 2 other ones. I think it's Detection and Defile, I think, perhaps. So interesting poisons can be made from this. There has been some discussion as to whether or not you can use the minor heroism potion with the restore stamina on a stamina DPS and instead get major savagery from the Fighter's Guild ability Expert Hunter and have a DK tank run igneous weapons or molten weapons instead for the major brutality. There's some discussion on that because it does give you a little bit more ulti gen. But it remains to be seen whether or not this minor heroism potion is going to be better than running your typical spell power potions instead. And then we will talk about a couple of the base game changes here, just because it's kind of along the same sort of page here, same sort of section. We do have a new guild finder, so you can now look for guilds. There are some new guild features that were introduced. There's a new PvP weapon artifact, Volendrung, so it can be wielded by any player in Cyrodiil and spawns in the world about 4 to 5 times a day. You have to keep feeding the weapon alliance points, so it does not count repairing structures or resurrecting other players. You basically have to kill or just take sieges, or else the power of the weapon will drain your life. In other words, it will kill you. And then it also added a tutorial for this weapon led by Sheo Gorath. So it looks like when you pick it up, your weapon and your ability bars will swap out, your stats will be adjusted. So it does seem like it's basically sort of a transformation when you pick it up. So it'll be interesting to see how this artifact plays out in PvP. They talked about the Cyrodiil campaign adjustments, so now you have the alliance locked. This is Sota Seal, this is Vivek. Shore is still unlocked, so you can play multiple alliances here, but for Sota Seal and Vivek, you can only play on one alliance. So if you go into Sota Seal with an AD character, only AD characters will be able to join in Sota Seal for that campaign. And it's kind of the same thing with Vivek. If you join with a DC character, only DC characters can join from there on out. Other campaigns are not alliance locked, so you can join Shore with no alliance. Then you have the below 50, and you have Imperial City is getting its own campaign, so they have a no CP and a CP enabled Imperial City campaign here. And then they reworked a few item sets here. So the first one is Robes of the Withered Hand, which is the light armor set. I believe it's from Alakir Desert. I'm not 100% sure where this is. So the new 5-piece, when an enemy you recently damaged dies, you heal for 1450 health and gain 1450 magicka. And it's going to occur every 3 seconds. This is a slight buff to the old version. Vestments of the Warlock is a light armor set. Not 100% sure where this comes from. The new one, when you fall below 25% magicka, you restore 11,350 magicka. This effect can occur once every 4 to 5 seconds, so compared to the old, the proc condition is lower, it restores more magicka, and it is on a lower cooldown. Essence Thief is the medium armor set from White Gold Tower. The new New 5-piece, when you deal damage to the light attack, you draw essence from the enemy. Collecting the essence heals you for 3900 health, 3900 stamina, and increases your damage down by 10% for 10 seconds. The essence lasts for 5 seconds and it spawns closer to your target. So actually, I do know somebody who has tested out Essence Thief, and it is actually a little bit better. But compared to using Advanced Yokeda on a Stamina Nightblade, it was pulling about 3k less on the raid dummy. So it's not gonna be the new best in slot set, but it is very nice for sustain. So he did mention that while he was running this set, he didn't have any issues whatsoever with sustain. He can probably run like blue food and be perfectly fine not using siphoning attacks on his Stamina Nightblade. So definitely something to maybe consider, but it's not going to be the best in slot set. Droppings of Invigoration, this is the exact same thing as Vestments of Warlock, which we covered above, just for stamina. So when you fall below 25% stamina, you restore 11,350 stamina, and it can occur every 4 to 5 seconds. Reaching Plate is the heavy armor set from Imperial City Prison. So the new set has a new 4-piece, so instead of healing taken, it is max health. In a 5-piece, when you take damage, you have a 20% chance to summon a cloud of leeching poison under the assailant. The cloud deals 1200 poison damage in a 5-meter radius every second for 5 seconds, and heals you for 100% of the damage caused. So this is generally speaking going to be about a wash, so you have a higher probability of proccing this. So Leeching Plate is used most often in format content, particularly Black Rose Prison, to heal up the tank when high damage scenarios. So this just basically gives you a higher chance to get it to proc. The damage is nerfed a little bit, it just increased the radius a little bit more, but you do lose that 4% healing taken, so this ends up being about a wash overall. And finally, Affliction. Same thing with Leeching, they did change the 4-piece, so instead of Max Magicka, it is Stamina Regen. The 5-piece, when you deal damage, you have a 50% chance to deal an additional 1830 disease damage and afflict your target with Reminder to File for 4 seconds. This effect can occur once every 4 seconds, so they basically reduced the disease damage, but they did include Reminder to File as kind of a compensation there. Then they have new motifs, and the big thing, ESO logs. This is actually going to be a completely separate video. I've already talked about ESO logs in a previous video, but this next video is going to be kind of showing you guys what the log actually looks like and what you can glean from it. I did showcase it a little bit towards the end of last night's stream, so you can take a look at that there, but I will be doing a completely separate video just taking a look at ESO logs, how to use it, what sort of information you can pull out of it. And then finally, they do mention Scarshard achievements for alternative characters. So once you complete a Scarshard Hunter achievement on one character, you can now purchase that achievement on other characters instead. So no longer do you have to farm Sky Shards on all characters, you just have to farm it on one, and you can buy the Sky Shards on a different character using crowns. So that is pretty much going to be it for this video. Again, the other changes will be in separate videos, taking a look at classes and then anything else that kind of didn't fall under this video or the class changes. So be on the lookout for those. So that's it for this video. Hope you guys found this informative. I'll have a link down in the description below to the full patch notes if you want to read that at your own leisure. Hope you guys found this video informative, and I'll see you guys in the next dungeon.